Have you ever put on a piece of music like maybe a friend recommended it or you just kind of stumbled onto some weird algorithmic playlist and you hit play and instantly you think, is something broken?
Oh, yeah. Like, you immediately pull out your earbuds?
Right. You check the Bluetooth connection, you check your volume, because what you're hearing, it has absolutely no melody. I mean, there's no obvious rhythm. There is definitely no chorus to sing along to.
Just this 15-minute collection of sounds.
Exactly, like maybe a low vibrating groan, some sudden metallic clangs, and just like a wash of static. And you just sit there staring at your phone thinking to yourself, I just don't get it.
It's actually a nearly universal reaction to avant-garde audio.
Yeah.
I mean, most people endure that confusion for about, what, 10 seconds?
Yeah, if that.
Right, and then they hit skip and just rush back to a familiar playlist.
Yeah.
Because we are so deeply conditioned to believe that if music doesn't immediately make sense to us, well, then the music is flawed.
Oh.
Or, at the very least, it's just, pretentious noise that isn't meant for us.
Well, today we are doing a deep dive into a stack of really fascinating sources. We've got neuroscience journals on auditory processing, music theory essays, cultural critiques, and they explore exactly why experimental music sounds so incredibly difficult.
And they make a pretty bold claim, too.
They do. They argue that the problem isn't actually the music itself. The problem is the biological and cultural way we've been taught to listen.
Yeah, the materials we're looking at today, they really demand a complete paradigm shift in how we approach sound. We kind of have to examine the mechanics of our own brains.
Specifically, how our evolutionary wiring dictates our Spotify preferences, right?
Exactly.
So in this deep dive, we are going to look at the actual neurological mechanics of why we love pop music, how experimental music deliberately dismantles all of our biological comfort zones, and this is the crazy part, why leaning into that deeply uncomfortable space might actually be one of the most vital mental skills we can practice today.
Yeah. So to really understand the friction of experimental music, we basically have to start at the opposite end of the spectrum. We have to look at the biology of what feels easy.
Okay, lay on us.
So most popular music is built entirely around one foundational concept, which is temporal prediction. Our brains are, at their core, just giant prediction engines.
Like trying to guess the future constantly.
Exactly. From an evolutionary standpoint, recognizing auditory patterns in time, that's what kept our ancestors alive.
Oh, sure.
Like, if you hear a rhythmic rustling in the bushes, your brain calculates the timing and predicts, oh, a predator is arriving. You prepare, you survive.
Right.
Because of that, the human brain heavily rewards you with a dopamine release every single time you correctly anticipate what comes next in any temporal sequence.
So pop music effectively hacks that ancient survival system. It's basically like auditory sugar.
That's exactly what it is. Think about the structure of a standard pop song. A beat establishes a pulse, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Your basal ganglia, which is the part of the brain involved in timing and movement, it immediately maps that grid. It knows precisely when the next kick drum is going to land.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Then a melody starts. It repeats a familiar contour. The verse builds up tension. And your brain calculates, based on, thousands of hours of previous listening, that a chorus is coming right now.
And when it hits?
When it hits on the exact millisecond you expected it to, your brain just floods your system with a little hit of dopamine.
Yeah.
Every single time you correctly anticipate the structural resolution of the song, you get a neurological reward.
So it's not just that we emotionally connect with, like, the heartbreak in the lyrics or that the singer has a great voice. There is a literal pleasure cycle constantly looping in the brain.
Literally biological.
It's kind of like watching a highly formulaic romantic comedy, you know?
That's a great way to put it.
Like, you know the exact beats of the story. You know the two leads are going to meet in some clumsy, charming way. You know they're going to have a massive misunderstanding at the end of the second act.
Right, the classic breakup before the finale.
Exactly. And you are just sitting on your couch, and you know the precise moment they will finally kiss in the pouring rain. And when they do, it feels incredibly satisfying. You aren't shocked. You aren't challenged. You're satisfied because you called it. It feels genuinely good to be right.
Yeah, the rom-com doesn't exist to shock the viewer. It exists to fulfill the pattern the viewer already knows and craves.
Right.
And pop music operates on that exact same neurological real estate. It creates tension, then resolves it. It sets up a harmonic expectation, then fulfills it. It's feeding our brain's deepest, most primal desire to be right about the immediate future.
Okay, so if pop music is the rom-com that feeds our prediction machine, does experimental music just deliberately starve our brains of these little dopamine snacks? Because I've tried listening to some of the avant-garde tracks mentioned in our sources, and my genuine reaction is usually just frustration.
It could be really grating at first.
Yeah, it sounds like a broken refrigerator recorded through a tin can.
Well, the sources actually confirm that this starvation is the entire point. Experimental music actively interrupts that cycle of prediction and reward,
It's on purpose.
completely on purpose. It removes the 44 time signature, so your basal ganglia can't lock onto a groove. It refuses to resolve the chord progression, leaving the harmonic tension just hanging in the air indefinitely.
That sounds exhausting.
It kind of is. It actively denies your auditory cortex the satisfaction of guessing what comes next. Your brain is literally burning metabolic energy trying to find a pattern, and when it fails to find one, it registers that failure as physical fatigue, frustration, and basically a desire to escape the noise.
Okay, but wait. If nothing is really happening, since experimental music refuses to give us predictions to guess, what is it actually doing?
That's the big question.
Let's ground this in reality instead of abstract concepts. Our sources highlight a French experimental music collective called Engine de Plâtrine. And if you look at their instrumentation, they aren't using traditional drum kits and guitars.
No, not at all.
They use contact microphones attached to sheets of metal, bowed cymbals, low-frequency analog oscillators. There is no beat. There is no singer.
Yeah, and when you listen to a piece by them, you are thrust into an auditory space that lacks what music theorists call a tonal center.
A tonal center.
Right. In a standard song, the tonal center is the home bass note. It's the center of gravity that the rest of the melody revolves around and eventually returns to.
Okay.
Without a tonal center, you feel like you're floating in zero gravity. There's no up or down. But the text points out that this kind of music isn't asking you to play hide and seek with a melody. By starving the temporal prediction engine, it forces your brain into a completely different mode of attention.
Okay, so we have to shift our brains from asking, what comes next to
Sure.
what is happening right now. But if nothing is really happening like in a normal song, how do we listen without just getting agonizingly bored?
That is such a valid question. And the source material actually offers a brilliant comparison to help restructure our mindset. We have to stop treating the music like a narrative and start treating it like a landscape.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, it's less like following a story and much more like observing the weather.
Right. So it's like when you sit on a porch and watch a heavy storm roll in. You don't ask, oh, what's the chorus of this thunderstorm?
Exactly.
You don't get frustrated that the wind didn't resolve into a perfect C major chord. Nothing is happening in the traditional sense of a protagonist achieving a goal.
No, it's just weather.
But if you sit and pay attention, everything is constantly dynamically changing. Like the ambient temperature drops, the color of the light shifts, the density of the rain fluctuating against the pavement creates these complex polyrhythms. You are just experiencing the elements as they exist in the moment. So experimental music is just auditory weather.
I love that. And adopting that mindset entirely changes the definition of what we are doing when we put on headphones.
Because we aren't waiting for the payoff.
Right. We are no longer consuming a structured entertainment product. We are temporarily inhabiting an environment. And environments don't have clear beginnings, middle eights, and fade-outs. They simply exist. Recognizing this requires the brain to abandon its most ingrained dopamine-seeking habits.
And the texts promise that if we do this, if we actually sit in that uncomfortable, gravity-less sonic space and just watch the auditory weather, there's this massive biological and psychological payoff.
Yeah, a massive breakthrough.
But only if the listener can push past the initial urge to hit the skip button. So what is this breakthrough?
Well, the sources describe this phenomenon as a strange shift that frequent listeners of experimental and drone music report. After a period of sitting with the intense discomfort, the music suddenly stops feeling random.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Patterns actually do begin to emerge. But the crucial detail here is that the audio track hasn't changed. The oscillator is playing the exact same frequencies and textures it was playing 10 minutes ago. What has fundamentally changed is the listener's neurological perception.
So the brain finally just gives up on looking for the pop music map.
Exactly.
It stops trying to sequence the audio in time and starts analyzing the spatial and textural data. It's actually incredibly similar to the experience of staring at one of those magic eye posters from the 1990s.
Oh, yes, that is a perfect analogy.
Right. When you first walk up to one of those posters, it is just a wall of uncomfortable visual static. It kind of hurts your eyes slightly.
It does.
And if you try to look at it normally, searching for sharp lines and normal depth cues, you just get frustrated. But if you soften your focus, stop trying to force the image to make sense, and just let your eyes relax into the uncertainty, suddenly, a three-dimensional image pops right out of the static.
The mechanics are remarkably similar. When you stare at the visual noise, your visual cortex is desperately trying to find standard boundaries. It fails, which feels physically uncomfortable. But relaxing those rigid expectations allows a new layer of depth to reveal itself. In experimental music, you are basically softening your auditory focus. You stop scanning for the sharp line of a melody, and suddenly the three-dimensional space of the sound design opens up. You start hearing the minute harmonic relationships between, like, the metal scrapes and the low drones that were entirely invisible to your brain 10 minutes prior.
And because this reward, this sudden realization of depth and texture, is gradual rather than instant, I imagine it often feels much deeper than the quick sugar rush of a pop chorus.
Oh, absolutely. It's an earned realization.
You had to collaborate with the art to find the meaning. The discomfort you felt at the beginning wasn't a failure of your taste, and it wasn't a failure of the composer. It was just the feeling of uncertainty. And passing through that uncertainty is what makes the final auditory revelation so striking.
Which really brings us to the broader cultural argument laid out in our source text. Because this shift in perception isn't framed merely as a trick to learn how to enjoy weird synthesizer noises.
Right. It's way bigger than that.
Yeah, the authors frame this as a vital, increasingly endangered mental skill. They argue that experimental music trains a completely different, highly necessary way of paying attention.
And man, we need that because we live in a world fundamentally architected around speed, frictionless consumption, and instant recognition.
Oh, definitely.
The sources point to data regarding modern streaming algorithms to highlight how drastically our listening habits have changed. Because platforms like Spotify and Apple Music pay fractions of a cent per stream, and they only count a stream if the listener stays for at least 30 seconds. Pop music has been aggressively re-engineered.
The 30-second rule has changed everything.
It really has. The long atmospheric intros of the 1970s and 80s are almost entirely gone. If a song doesn't hook the listener with a vocal melody or a massive beat within the first 5 to 10 seconds, the data shows the listener will just skip it.
Yeah, we are basically seeing the TikTokification of audio. Algorithms feed us endless streams of videos and songs they already know we will like based on our previous behavioral data. So we are kept in this perpetual, highly engineered state of comfort and prediction. Our brains are never starved of those dopamine hits. The underlying danger highlighted by the cultural critiques in our sources is that our capacity for patience is rapidly atrophying. We are literally losing the cognitive ability to sit with things we don't immediately understand.
You see it everywhere, honestly, not just in music. If an article takes more than 2 minutes to read, we look for the bulleted summary.
Guilty as charged.
Right. Or if a movie doesn't have an action sequence or a major plot hook in the first scene, we pull out our phones and start scrolling while it plays in the background. We just demand immediate legibility from all of our media.
And that's why experimental music functions as this amazing pocket of resistance against that demand. It provides a safe, contained space to practice a different way of existing in the world.
I love that idea of a pocket of resistance.
Yeah, and a culture driven by instant gratification and algorithmic certainty. This music actively values uncertainty. Instead of giving us immediate answers and easily digestible patterns, it teaches the listener the really difficult skill of how to remain present with challenging, illegible information.
It's essentially cognitive weightlifting.
That's exactly it.
Like, if you can train yourself to sit in a room listening to a wall of challenging, mapless sound for 20 minutes without immediately reaching for your phone to relieve your anxiety, you are building emotional resilience. You are teaching your nervous system that it is perfectly safe to not know what comes next.
Yes, you don't have to constantly predict the future to survive the present moment.
That is such a profound takeaway.
Because experimental music was never designed for comfort. It was designed to expand the boundaries of perception. It flatly refuses to reward the easy, passive habits we've developed through, algorithmic curation.
So the difficulty you experience when you listen to it, that creeping frustration, the sense of, I don't get it, that isn't a barrier keeping you from the true experience.
No, that difficulty is the experience. It's the palpable sensation of your brain being forced to learn a new method of processing reality in real time.
Our sources make it clear that it's perfectly fine if not every listener ends up actually enjoying avant-garde soundscapes.
Hmm.
Nobody is suggesting you have to replace your entire music library with recordings of scraping metal and oscillator hums.
Please don't do that.
Right. But the invitation to practice this kind of listening is always there. So here is a direct challenge for you, drawn straight from the insights we've explored today. The next time you hear a piece of music that feels impossible to understand, whether it's an intimidating piece of classical music, experimental noise, or just a genre you've always dismissed as chaotic, try to catch your brain in the act of prediction. When you feel the urge to hit skip, don't ask yourself, do I like this?
Because asking, do I like this, is just the old prediction machine looking for its familiar dopamine hit.
Exactly. Bypass the prediction machine entirely. Ask instead, what is this asking me to hear? Stop looking for the street signs, stop waiting for the chorus, and just look at the landscape. Watch the auditory weather. Let the acoustic pressure sit in the room with you.
And the music theory texts we analyzed leave us with a deeply compelling final thought here. They suggest that the most unfamiliar sounds reveal the most unfamiliar parts of ourselves.
Wow.
So if our brains and our algorithms are so aggressively wired to crave the cycle of prediction and instant comfort, what other areas of your daily life, like your career trajectory, your reading habits, the people you choose to spend time with, are you keeping safely, rigidly predictable? What completely unfamiliar parts of yourself might you discover if you actively sought out the experimental in your routine and simply allowed yourself to sit with the deep discomfort of having no map?